Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Let me know where you're from. Say hello. Tell me where you're from, everybody. I am Marnie Ginsberg of Reading Simplified. And tonight we're going to be talking about just 6 simple literacy centers that develop readers. These are 6 simple literacy centers that can be simple to implement, simple to differentiate with, and yet really get results. So I'm excited to share these 6 centers with you. We're at the end of a 4-week series on what to do with the rest of the class. This is the struggle that so many teachers face while we're doing guided reading. The rest of the class really gives us issues, right? They goof off, or they don't do the work, or the work is too easy, or the work is too hard. So tonight we're bringing it all together. And I'm going to share with you the centers that really make a difference and how to implement them in a differentiated manner. So I'm excited that you're here. Say hi. Tell me where you're from. I know some of you are just tuning in, so we're going to be talking about 6 literacy centers that develop readers. So Lori Ann from Ontario, Newmarket, Ontario, welcome. As we get started, I'm so excited about this culmination of 4 weeks of this topic, which is a topic that you requested. You guys said over and over again, how do I deal with the rest of the class? Okay, guided reading is hard enough, but how do I deal with the rest of the class? So this is your interest. So I'm excited to be wrapping this up this week. But at the same time, we've just been in the U.S. dealing with one tragedy after another, and my heart goes out to those folks who've suffered in Las Vegas and those who are connected in any way to that tragedy. And so my prayers are there with those folks. And I just wanted to say, I'm sure many of you agree with me that you're praying and you're thinking about those folks. And it's just an absolutely senseless tragedy. And I was sad also to find out that many of the folks that died were teachers and school personnel. So that is something that is just heavy on many of our hearts, I know. But we're going to trudge forward and serve our students as best we can. So what are these 6 literacy centers? Are you ready to hear about them? I'm going to start showing them. If you're just popping in, let me know where you're from. And let me know what your best center is. What is the best, what do you get the best engagement from? I'd love to know that. All right, so we are diving into these 6 literacy centers. And let me know what are your best centers. Maybe just one center that's your best. I'd love to hear from you about that. Okay, so let's dive into the 6 centers that I'm going to recommend to you guys. The first thing that I want you to know before we dive into these 6 centers is the background of how I think about what makes them effective. So the things that are really going to move the needle for our readers when we're not working with them is that they're getting lots of accurate reading practice. Oh, hi, Maria. Glad you're here. So if the students are going off and working independently and they're not practicing their reading in an accurate way, it's going to be super inefficient. The other thing the second principle that I want you to keep in mind is that we want to extend the most pressing need from the guided reading session out into the centers or the workstations. In other words, if the students in a group are working with me on short A and short I, then I want them to practice short A and short I in many different ways as they can when they're on their own. I don't want the kids who are practicing short A and short I with me to go practice long O in the group because that's what the whole class is doing. I want to differentiate and in those centers that maps onto what they're doing with me, the teacher, in guided reading time or small group reading instruction. The other thing that's got to happen, particularly for anyone at the beginning stages of reading or anyone who is struggling, is they have to be getting a lot of strong sound symbol decoding practice. So in the centers, we're going to emphasize that because that's going to increase their reading achievement as rapidly as possible. And then finally, this principle of multiple exposures in multiple contexts. So if they see something, they're learning short E in this context, maybe reading a particular text. What if they practice short E moving cards? in a different context. And then they listen to a text and they follow along with their eyes. It's short E reinforced. So multiple contexts, different materials, sometimes with a teacher, sometimes with a partner, sometimes with a parent. That's what I mean by multiple exposures in multiple contexts. We're trying to barrage them with their most pressing need, not only during guided reading or small group reading instruction, but also during the literacy centers. Okay. So Melody, you're coming in from San Antonio. Awesome. And hi, Sherry. Glad you're here. Okay, let's see. What's next? So these are the centers that get results. The first three are heavy on the decoding compartment because that is what really will ratchet their reading as rapidly as possible. Word work, any type of manipulatives, games, or worksheets. That's one of the core centers I would be using all year with any groups of students that are beginning or struggling. How can you be sure that they're having accurate reading practice? That's a great question, Samantha. Let's get to that more when we're talking about that fourth center, rereading. And a little bit will come up with in the centers 2 and 3. But that's a great question, Samantha. Let me keep that thought. A second center is apps for word work. So any kind of device that iPod or other iPad or any kind of device where they can play with a game where they're going to target their sound symbol processing, that's going to be a good center that I can rely on. And I know they're probably going to be engaged at. Similarly, maybe computer station. So free online games I'm going to share with you. Jamie says, okay, so these are the 6 centers. Jamie, you can't stay long, but I'm glad you're here from Nashville. So those first 3 are heavy on the decoding. The fourth one kind of bridges from decoding into developing word automaticity or word identification and fluency, and that's rereading. I want them to take the text that they read with the teacher and then go reread it multiple times during the school day and ideally at home for homework so that they come back the next day having mastered that text. What does that do for them? Well, it gives them a lot of confidence, builds their fluency, motivation, but also it builds their high frequency word knowledge as fast as anything I've ever seen. And then we're going to, so those are kind of the decoding and word identification elements. Next, we're moving into more comprehension vocabulary. So I want them to be able to retell or summarize a story, either what they're reading for retelling or something that they've heard from me as a read aloud, or another thing maybe that they've done in the listening along center. So retelling is be more comprehension focused, and then listening along, just either listening without looking or listening and looking at the text in front of them. So those are the 6 centers. Now let's get into a little bit more about those first few. And if you are just popping in, let me know where you're from. And also, I'd love to hear a center that you do or some sort of independent activity that you think is really successful. Your kids are engaged, that you get results and works year after year. So why is there this heavy emphasis on word workstations or literacy centers? I've got the apps, the computer stations all in word work, and the word work games. Well, really, this is how we become fluent. Along this pathway here, this streamlined pathway, this is for Reading Simplified. This is our one-page view on how kids move from beginning reading to being fluent. And the core of it all is quickly developing their sound symbol processing. And so these 3 centers really bulk that up quickly, and they move into fluency quickly. Valerie, welcome from Trinidad and Tobago. I'm glad you're here. So the more quickly that we get into fluency, the better they will be as readers. Really, the hallmark of good reading is fluency. Having a good reading rate and having intonation and prosody that makes sense. Did you know that fluent reading is correlated about 0.7 with reading comprehension? In other words, to be a good comprehender, most of it is going to be explained by fluency, quick automatic word reading, and sounding like you are supposed to. So that's why we emphasize that decoding element in a lot of the centers for anyone who's a beginning reader or a struggling reader. Moving our kids along this streamlined pathway. And the streamlined pathway is really how I think about instruction for kids during guided reading, but also out in the centers. And hopefully you'll see that today. Okay, so this was something that we talked about last week. And if you go back to our blog, readingsimplified.com, you can find more about this concept. But I'm not trying to get you guys to be staying up late, right? And work on centers every night. My vision and I hope you agree with me, hi Samantha, is to have you do a few core centers that you repeat. And the only thing that you have to vary is the words that the kids pick out. So that's how you meet their needs without recreating activities day after day after day. And hopefully as you get into this little discussion, you'll understand that and you'll see that happening. Okay, so for instance, you're going to have a constant station of word work. Every day I'm going to have some kind of word work. Maybe on Monday it's a different type of activity, but on Tuesday maybe I'm always going to do a card game called Crazy Shorts or Crazy Longs, and each card deck is for a different vowel sound. So if my kids are at, short A and short I might give them the short A or short I card deck for the short Crazy Shorts. But if I've got some kids who are doing the long O with me during guided reading, they're going to do the same card game, but just the same game, but just a different deck of cards, right? So I don't have to think about a bajillion things to get out for everybody. I just know Tuesday, I'm going to get out my box of crazy shorts and longs games, and kids are going to pick based on what they're doing during guided reading or small group reading instruction. So that's what undergirds this framework. And Samantha picks a lot of centers from the Florida Reading Center and other creators. That's great. The Florida Reading Center is an amazing resource. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you are just other ideas. I don't expect them to be the only thing that you would use. I just want you to think about these 6 centers as kind of core ones that'll make the difference, and think of the things that I suggest as possibilities that you might use or how you might adapt what you already have to fit the principles that I'm suggesting here to make it easier on you. So here, for instance, is just a number of things that you can do for a word work station or center, any kinds of manipulatives and games. So I'm going to show you some examples from this long list. And as you see these activities, you probably have some of these types of resources in your classroom. Think about how you could use them the same way, but still differentiate. So not ask everybody to do short A all week when you've got kids who already have mastered it and kids maybe aren't ready for it. So here are some of those. So for instance, the first one there is the Reading Simplified activity pages. Welcome, Bobby. Glad you're here. So inside the Reading Simplified Academy, I have a lot of resources that are grouped by vowel sound, and that correspond perfectly with the streamlined pathway. And so if the student there on the left, say the students that I'm working with are working on short A and short I, which is step 1 on the pathway, they might want to do this activity page. And then here's one in the middle with kids who are at like level 3 or level 4, I believe, on the streamlined pathway. They would cut these little cards out and read them and act them out. That would be just a word work activity, or a word find with short vowels being reviewed. Or maybe the student is further on the streamlined pathway working on the sound. They might do this last activity page. So I'm sure you have, let me just move this little picture out of the way. See, that's what the looks like. I'm sure you have activity pages that you could use. My principle here is just to meet kids' needs, map what they're doing off in the word workstation with their level in guided reading. And if you use the streamlined pathway, it's pretty easy to think about that. And if you haven't heard of the streamlined pathway yet, I encourage you to go to readingsimplified.com/start-here, readingsimplified.com/start-here to find the Reading Simplified pathway, streamlined pathway. Here's another example. These are so much fun. To build words, match them with the picture. And so everybody could be doing the same activity. Say it's a Wednesday. You're going to do build a word and picture matching. But some kids would be down here, right, with level 1, and they would be matching short A and short I words, whereas another group might be just past that, and they can match short O and short E, but they're also going to be doing short A and short I because these are all cumulative. Some kids are going to be doing short U. All right. How does this sound? Have you done some picture word matching like this? Give me a thumbs up if this is something that makes sense to you. Can you see how it would go along this streamlined pathway, giving kids different levels based on what they're doing with you in guided reading so their most pressing needs are being met? Here is the same concept, but matching the word, building the word and then matching it with an object. That's a little bit more tricky to manage, obviously, but it's so much fun. Thank you, Samantha. And you can just find resources around your house, or you can also purchase some. Great, Bobby. I'm glad this works for you. And then maybe the next level up is not building a word, but then they just have the word. Just take a word card and match it with the object or match it with a picture. Again, every day, say this would be on a Thursday, I might do at my word workstation, I might do word picture matching or word object matching. Everybody's going to do the same thing today on Thursday, say, but some kids are doing level 1 words, some kids are doing level 2 words, some kids are doing level 3, some are on 5 or 6, and so on. So it just kind of builds up the streamlined pathway there. Okay, so then you got to really figure out how to store it. This is what I recommend. Like you bring out your tackle box, and it's Thursday, and kids, you're going to be doing short E. Giraffes, you're going to be short E, and zebras, you're doing CCVC1. Does that make sense? Letter tubs, exactly, Samantha. I love it. You're right on track with me. Okay, say another day for the WordWorks Center, you might do crazy shorts and crazy longs. This is a game that you can get at soundreaders.com. You can also find some variations on it at, Teachers Pay Teachers or make your own. So it's a game similar to Crazy 8, except each deck of cards would be targeting one sound. So if I know my kids are group giraffe and group zebra is having trouble with short E, I'm going to give them the short E. But if my giraffe is doing the sound, I'll give them the sound deck. Okay, so it's easy on me. I know, say Friday, I'm doing crazy shorts, doing crazy longs, but everybody's needs are being met. Are they going to be engaged, do you think, if they're playing this game? What do you think? I see a thumbs up from Lorianne. It's a game. It's at their level. And it's not the same day by day. This is only something I may bring out on Friday or may bring out every 6 or 7 days. Jamie, I am going to ask you to look for this recording in the Facebook feed if you're going to have to head out. And also it'll be on my blog in about a week. So that you can find it in those 2 places. Or you could adapt Candyland, create word cards like I've done there in that example. Thanks, Anna. And one group does the long O, and another group may be doing E, and another group may be doing A, or maybe a group who's really far down the streamline pathway is reviewing O, E, and A. You just combine them all together. I actually have a whole set of cards that have been produced to use along with Candyland. That it's something that we give out at our workshop if you become a Reading Simplified Academy member. So if you haven't gone to our 3 activities a day to keep reading difficulties away workshop, please consider that, and you'll get this freebie if you decide to become a member of our academy. And if you don't know about that workshop, look at the top of our blog, readingsimplified.com. Look at the top for the orange banner. Jamie, that's sweet. Maybe you can do any kind of variation on a bingo game. So here, for instance, is level 6 on the streamline pathway. Any kind of vowel plus E pattern, you can play that bingo game here that Play-Doh to Plato made. Another group might be doing the same kind of thing. Bingo, maybe it's Monday where it's bingo day, but one other group is doing the sound, whereas last week they were doing the vowel plus E, but now they're doing Another group may be further along and they're doing ow. So these are just examples of things that you can do. You may already be doing, and that's great if you are. And if you haven't thought about how to differentiate, hopefully this can kind of flesh it out for you. Oh, Samantha, she saw the webinar. Thank you. I'm so glad you thought it was great. Okay, so if you haven't seen the EduCreations app, this is so much fun. Your kids can write, and it'll record their voice and their writing. So they can say red, even change the color like that, and then they can listen to themselves back. Which kid will not enjoy that? I think they all will. So say here, everybody's doing on Tuesday, say we're going to do EduCreations, write and say, but you just give out different word lists. One group's doing short E word lists, and one group may be doing all short vowels. Another group is going to be doing long O. And so you still can differentiate and still not overwhelm yourself with so many apps. Paper word chains are a fun way to do a variation on Switch It, which is one of our core activities that we teach here at Reading Simplified. So switch held to help and help to yelp. Well, what if you scrambled up those little strips of paper and then asked kids to recreate them in order and then create this paper chain? That would be challenging for them, wouldn't it? But you could, again, do it at different levels. So some kids may be just at CVC, some may be at CVCC. Melody. You're asking, would you have them work on the step level they have completed in the group, or what instructional level they are now? So typically, any step that they're working on in the Streamline Pathway with a teacher, they're probably going to be working at that level for a week or maybe a few days. So then, yes, they would go off and do the same thing at centers in general. There's some exceptions to that. For instance, like with Switch It, I might be able to get a child to do 5 sound Switch It with my help because I'm there guiding them. But when they're out on their own, it's independent time, right? That may be too hard unless they work together cooperatively. So I might ratchet the level back down slightly. But for the vowels, particularly, I would have them in alignment. They would be doing the same thing they're doing with me during guided reading, or reviewing what they've done before. I hope that makes sense. Most of the things that I'm talking about are free, Samantha. So the apps that are coming up are going to be cost a little bit, but all these activities, for the most part, the EduCreations app, you know what? I don't think it's free, but it's not too expensive. So when you keep thinking about all these different centers, I follow the Keep It Simple sister approach, to not do too much, not to make it overwhelming, but just create maybe 6 or 7 centers for word work that I would rotate each week. So here's just a hypothetical example. Okay, so maybe just for that word work center, maybe week 1 on Monday, kids are doing word chains. Again, they're doing different levels, but everybody's going to do word chains. Tuesday, we're all playing chutes and ladders for word work. Different levels, but all the same game. Wednesday, maybe they're doing word picture match. Thursday, maybe they're doing some activity pages. If you're in the Reading Simplified Academy, you would have access to that. Friday, maybe they're playing the crazy shorts or crazy long card games. But then you want to switch it up. On Tuesday, instead of doing the same thing you did last week, chutes and ladders, bring in another center that you have, write and say word lists from that EduCreations app, or you could use any app that you have where they can be recorded. And then say instead of word picture match on Wednesday, maybe you bring in word object match. So you just kind of, move things around so that there's a little variety. You keep them on their toes, but it's not 30 different word workstations. I can bring back the word chains in about 8 to 10 days, and they'll still have fun because the next time it'll be a harder level. They might have been at CVC 10 days ago, but the next time they do it, they'll be at CVCC or higher. So that's just a hypothetical about how you can create a cluster of activities and rotate them, and also differentiate, because the vision is this, right? We shouldn't be working late every night, and we should have some time off for ourselves. Who's with me? Okay, so that was a lot on the word work. I'm going to speed up as we move forward. But hopefully you got the principle about how to differentiate, how to create some constants in your life and not have to be cutting and pasting every night and searching on Pinterest long into the wee hours of the morning. Okay, so let's talk next about apps. There's a lot of good apps out there where you can actually meet kids' needs. Again, map them onto their most pressing need that you've discovered from the guided reading. So I want to encourage you to check some of these out. They're not free, but they're all under $4, I'm pretty sure, except for Letter School. Their price just went up because this is a really cool app. If your kids don't know the alphabet and the short vowels, then and they also want handwriting practice, then go to Letter School. That's an awesome one. Bob Book's Reading Magic is great for practicing early CVC words, and it's got color. It's more fun, frankly, than the Bob books themselves. And it does emphasis on segmenting and blending. Phonics, Fun on the Farm, is really a very diverse app. It has a lot of features. I was impressed. Harry Phonics #1 would be kind of easier when the kids are learning consonants and short vowels. But if they're moving into long vowels, or what we call advanced phonics, then I'd recommend Montessori Crosswords, Ready, Set, Read by Lupine Learning, on the Harry Phonics #2 and #3, and then Build a Word, Easy Spelling with Phonics. By the way, I just forgot to mention, the things that I'm mentioning tonight, I've actually created a PDF, and many of these things, if you click on them, you could get to the website where you would order this, or a website where you'd see examples of it. So this is a free resource guide if you go to the link above. Okay, so this will be here for you. You can grab this anytime, so you don't have to write furiously as I'm giving these examples. So I've got all 6 centers in this 6 Simple Literacy Centers resource guide. Okay, so Let's look at Montessori crosswords. This is one of my favorites. This is one of those advanced codes. So, but it also does the basic code. So say you have a kid here at level 2 on the streamline pathway, or a group of kids, they're doing the long O sound. Well, you can select that specific sound in Montessori crosswords, and they'll do these words. They'll do the O in road, the O in bowl, the O in rose. Isn't that cool? You don't see many apps that do that, do you? Where it's one sound and multiple spellings that you get exposed to all at once. That's the way to move them along rapidly. So that's one of my favorites. And C, you could do the same thing if you're at the short vowel level. Just pick this bullseye here, and the kids can be doing short E words like red, or they could be doing short A. So that's an awesome one that could very easily get kids' needs being met, and it's fun too. After they do the word, they get a little design comes on the screen, and they can move the design around, and I've never seen a kid that doesn't like that. So that's a highly engaging one that also teaches. So the same principle that we talked about before, where you find a set of apps and then you can rotate them. So you see here, there's a week of these apps, but then on Tuesday, maybe instead of doing Ready, Set, Read, you bring in Bob Books. And then on Wednesday, you bring in Letter School. So you rotate them around a little bit to create some variety, keep your kids on their toes. But again, you don't have to find a new app for every day. And there's some routines that they'll learn about how to use the app, but then if the app allows for differentiation, you can provide that and get their needs met in the most optimal way. If you have an app that you like that's really good for decoding, I'd love to hear about it, because there's probably more apps than in the world than any of us who are here could even be keeping track of. I'd love to hear, what are your apps that you love? Can you please share them with your colleagues? Okay, so then the same principle applies for computer stations for word work. I've got a list here that's also here of free computer games where you can match kids' needs. So I'm sure many of you know about Starfall, but what I encourage you to do there is to not just send everybody to do what they want, but if they are doing short A with you, then encourage them to do the short A activities and text on Starfall. Another group may be doing short A and short I, and they're going to be doing short A and short I text, whereas another group may be doing long O. Oh, ABC, yeah. I know about that, but I haven't seen it, Samantha. I'm glad to hear about that. I'll have to check it out more. So that was just fast and furious with the computer stations. If you have any favorite computer things, I would love to hear about that too. Apps or computers, please make some recommendations. I'll check some more out, but also I bet your colleagues would love to hear it. So, great. MobyMax. Okay, yes, I know that's a popular one. And does that do decoding, Melody? I know it does quite a lot, including math. So far we've been talking about decoding, and it's so important that you get your kids quickly to have a strong sound symbol decoding base. But then they need to also practice reading a lot so they can recognize those words. That's repetition, and reading practice is how they build their sight word bank and become automatic fast readers. So I encourage you to do the reading simplified activities that I teach a lot, like switch it, read it, and sort it, and do some of these independent centers that I've recommended. But then you can't just rely on decoding. You have to give them a lot of repetition and practice. So rereading is the best and easiest way to get that done. Yes, Starfall also does have the digraphs. That's an awesome part of Starfall. It's one of my favorites. It's amazing. It's been around for so long. So if you can get them into that accurate reading practice zone, that's so helpful. So Samantha asked about this earlier. One way that I encourage and allow or develop accurate reading practice is when the students are with the teacher and they're doing the guided reading of the new text. I recommend that you finish that lesson reading part of it or all of the text aloud to them and have them follow along with their eyes. So they've read it once, then they're going to get a second exposure with you reading it to them so that they're going to be moving closer to being accurate. And then depending on how challenging that text is at that point, you send them off in such a way so that they're more likely to get the accurate reading practice. So what do I mean? So in a group of, say, 4 or 5 kids, one kid's probably going to be much more accurate at that point after hearing it twice than another kid. So maybe you pair your strongest reader with your weaker reader in that group and have them buddy read. Or maybe you record yourself reading it aloud on some kind of device and send them to a station where they listen to it with a headphone splitter, and they listen to it again repeatedly. And so how do you ensure that they're listening to it? Well, you give them a sticker if they can come back the next day and read it to you with very few mistakes and sound fluent. So there's a lot of different ways to encourage accountability, Samantha, but you brought that up earlier, I think, and I think that's a really important point. Yes, free recorder on the iPad. That's great. And again, back to I've never heard a kid who doesn't like to hear themselves recording, their own voice. And in fact, sometimes it's almost like tricking them. You ask them, are you happy with that recording? Or do you want to make another one? And, oh, I want to do it again. Okay, practice your reading again, So that's one kind of sneaky way to use technology. So why is this rereading practice so important? I don't know if you have seen this famous data from a study about 20 or so years ago, but it's true for this study, but it probably just rings true for you in other domains. Okay, so kids who are at the 50th percentile, this blue rectangle in the center, they were found to have read about 600,000 words in a year. That sounds like a lot. But guess what kids reading at the 98th percentile read in a year? They read almost 5 million words. So that's a huge gap in reading practice. And what's most disconcerting is those kids at the 10th percentile, they're reading 50,000 words a year. So the 50th percentile is at least reading 600,000. So if we can get those words being read during the school day, because we can't count on it happening after school, then we will change our kids' achievement. So I would emphasize that finding the rereading practice opportunities and doing whatever you can to make the student successful is going to really pay off. And make, as the question was brought up earlier, do whatever you can to help them become accountable. Because if they're just looking at the book, obviously that's not going to help. I'm trying to move my face. You guys, let's see if I can, I'm on the wrong side. So I've got these ideas about how to promote real reading in this guide, so I encourage you to get it, and I am not going to go over it now, because I am going a little long, but let's move on to the last few centers. Here's one thing to track their time, so that some kids are motivated by seeing their chart go up. This is something that we provide in the Reading Simplified Academy. Or some kids might be excited to see how many. Whoa, sorry you guys. I lost you, but some of you are still here, so I'm impressed. All right, so let's finish up the last two are still really important, even though we've been talking about decoding and comprehension. So the first three were the decoding ones. The fourth one was rereading, building the word automaticity, fluency, high frequency words, sight words, whatever you want to call it. Then we need to do the retelling and summarization. That's the most important comprehension skill. If our kids can become good at summarizing, the world is their oyster. Everything else is kind of gravy and will come much more naturally with wide reading. So get the kids reading and summarizing. Maybe they can summarize what they did during guided reading, or maybe they can summarize what your read aloud is. Maybe they're going to do one day is puppets. Everybody does puppets. Maybe one day is they act it out and they can prepare something for the rest of the class or for another group. Maybe one day they draw the scenes of the read aloud that you did, or maybe one day you have the cards and they sort them in order, chronological order, or maybe you do a story grammar chart. Like here I have somebody who was the main character wanted this, but this was their problem, so this is how it resolved, and then this is the end of the story. So those are just some examples of ways of building in retelling, summarization as a routine part of your class, and listen into those because that's pivotal. And then finally, listening along. have them listen to sophisticated literature, stuff that they can't read on their own. Because listening to good literature increases their IQ and their potential. It's really valuable, not only during read aloud, but then when they're quietly on their own. I recommend that you generally aim about 2 years above their grade level. So maybe they're able to read at a second grade level themselves, but they could probably comprehend with listening to something that's harder. So do you guys already do that? Do you pick texts that are harder than your grade level for read alouds or for listening stations? You'll find that, that's not a rule that like everything has to be that way, but that's a general principle that will give your kids more exposure to great words that they don't know. This is another little study that I'm going to end with, okay? So let me move my chart over here. Researchers have studied how rare certain words are, and they even listened to a college graduate's speech when they're talking with friends, and they found that college graduates, when they're talking orally, they only use 17 rare words per 1,000. But even kids' books, children's literature, yes, uses many more rare words per 1,000, 30, almost 31. So even when you're reading a simple kids' book, you're exposing your children to more enriched vocabulary than they'll hear probably from you or their parents when they're talking about going to the grocery store or doing their homework. So that's why a listening along center is so important. It builds their vocabulary. So it enables them to read harder and harder books. Here's an example from Market Street. This won the Newbery recently, I believe. The outside air smelled like freedom, but it also smelled like rain, which freckled CJ's shirt and dripped down his nose. It's got this smelled like simile. We don't probably use that very much in everyday speech. And also the way that the word freckled was used isn't kind of how I would normally talk about my freckles, right? So it's a simple text. It's a beautiful, simple story, but it's sophisticated, isn't it, with language? And here is another example. And then I will say goodnight. The bus creaked to a stop in front of them. It sighed and sagged, and the doors swung open. It's a metaphor about the bus acting like an old person and using sophisticated words like creaked and sagged. I'm not going to say creaked when I'm talking to my kids about how their day was after school, right? So exposing them to a lot of literature through listening and then finding some way to hold them accountable by talking about it afterwards or summarizing it will be a great way to build their vocabulary and their understanding of the world. So that's why these are my 6 top centers. 3 for building decoding, 1 for building high frequency word knowledge or automaticity, and 2 for building comprehension. Thanks for staying here, you guys. If you want to get all of this wrapped up into one PDF, go to the link above, and it's yours for free. And a lot of these, even though it doesn't seem like it, a lot of these are hyperlinks to other information and other resources, some of which is free. So I'm glad you're here. And if you have outstanding questions, I'd love for you to put them in the chat, in the comments, or email me so that I can be thinking about what's going to serve your needs next. I hope to do another series coming up soon. Thanks for tuning into Reading Simplified, and share with your friends. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate y'all hanging in with me, even though I had tech problems. Bye-bye.